earlier when all the moms stood, I began to get very emotional because for the past 14 years of our marriage, when moms would stand or in all of our ministry opportunities, we've always honored moms, and I've always wondered what it would feel like to be honored as a mom, and today to have that opportunity is the culmination and the gift that I have waited a lot of years for. And so I have serious respect for moms now. They are superheroes. Genuine superheroes to me. I have so much respect for moms. You have to make decisions on the fly. You are doing all of this after sleepless nights, covered in poop, covered in urine, trying to sort out when you're going to eat next, if ever. And it's been such a fun journey, but also a wild one. I can't tell you how many times I've been licking my fingers after eating day-old popcorn because it was the closest thing I could find to eat, and wondering, did I wash my hands after that last diaper? And then I just keep licking away because what's the deal anyway? Who cares? Who cares? And it's been fun navigating two very different personalities in our twins. We have a daughter who is independent, wants her way right away. Since she has discovered the walker, she's just running all around the house all the time. It's kind of crazy. She loves her independence. And then we have our son who's a sweetheart, who's just a lover and a snuggler, and she's shouting me down right now. So it's so fun raising these two very different personalities. And to help illustrate their personalities, I have this picture here. So this is our daughter who's sweet and smiley and just happy about everything in life. She's our extrovert. And then there's our introvert, Justice, who is he's asking, why, Mom, why? What is this thing that is next to me? But I have to believe that Justice is actually preaching with that point. Easter's not about the bunny, people. It's about Jesus. You see him pointing to Jesus? He's preaching with that point. Well, I'm excited to preach this morning about a message titled, In the Den. In the Den. It's a story about Daniel in the lion's den, and it's a story about a man who was raised up to a level of prominence very quickly by King Darius, and all of the other people that worked for King Darius got jealous of him. And they didn't like that he had such favor in the king's eyes that they began to plot and to scheme to take Daniel out. So they began spying on all of his work and looking for flaws and failures and lies in his work, and they found none. They began looking throughout his character and trying to find some fault that they could find with his character, and they found none. The only thing that they could find, that they could pin on him, was that he was fervent in his prayer life. He prayed every single day, 3 times a day. And so what they began to plot to do is to go to King Darius and to say, Darius, wouldn't you love if everybody in the kingdom prayed only to you for the next month? And they began to appeal to his ego, and Darius, not thinking, because he actually really loved Daniel, not thinking about what this plot would do to Daniel, agrees. He says, yes, I would love everybody to pray to me and to me alone for the next month, and anybody who violates this has to be put to death in the lion's den. So let's pick up in chapter 6, beginning in verse 10. Now, when Daniel learned that the decree had been published, he went home to his upstairs room where the windows opened toward Jerusalem. 3 times a day, he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to his God, just as he had done before. Then these men went as a group and found Daniel praying and asking God for help. So they went to the king and spoke to him about his royal decree. Did you not publish a decree that during the next 30 days, anyone who prays to any god or human being except to you, your majesty, would be thrown into the lion's den? The king answered, the decree stands in accordance with the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be repealed. So the king gave the order. They brought Daniel, threw him into the lion's den. The king said to Daniel, "May your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you." A stone was brought, placed over the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the rings of the nobles, so that Daniel's situation might not be changed. Then the king returned to his palace and spent the night without eating, without any entertainment being brought to him, and he could not sleep. At the first light of dawn, the king got up and hurried to the lion's den. When he came near the den, he called to Daniel in an anguished voice, "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions?" Daniel answered, "May the king live forever. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me, because I was found innocent in his sight, nor have I ever done any wrong before you, your majesty." The king was overjoyed, gave orders to lift Daniel out of the den. And when Daniel was lifted from the den, no wound was found on him, because he had trusted in his God. Let's pray. Jesus, we thank you this morning that we have the opportunity to learn about how to navigate the dens of our life. I pray that this morning you would speak to us, and any words that are of me would fall to the floor, and words that are of you would pierce our hearts. In your name, Jesus, we pray. Amen. Have you ever found yourself in a situation that you want to get out of? Found yourself in a circumstance that you're going, "How did I get here?" And then trying to get out of it. Could be something as simple as having agreed to a dinner date, and then that night it might be raining, or you might be tired, and you're trying to figure out, how do I get out of this dinner date? I see some heads nodding. This has happened to you. Maybe it is helping somebody move. That Saturday morning rolls around and you go, why did I agree to do this? And you try to get out of it. Could be saying yes to that nasty house guest, that every time they come, they leave their towels on the floor and their shave clippings in the sink. I'm not speaking from personal experience or anything. They leave the house nastier than they found it. House guests. So sometimes there's these things that are good things, but we try to get out of it. Sometimes they're bad things, like a speeding ticket. Anybody ever had a speeding ticket? Yes, this is the church we pastor. A lot of speeding tickets. Had a speeding ticket that you try to get out of. I had an experience many years ago that I'm not proud of. I'm ashamed to admit that, yes, I have a past. I've made poor choices in my past. I remember when the Kodak camera, the disposable Kodak camera, came out, and I was really excited about it because this was back in the day before cell phones where you could just snap pictures all day long. And when this disposable camera came out, I was so excited. And I remember being with my friends and saying, "Hey guys, don't worry, camera's on me. I got this covered." Now, I had no means to purchase the camera. You see where I'm going with this. So I shoplifted the camera. Now, I was not an experienced shoplifter. I had no idea what I was doing. So I see the camera, I grab it, I put it in my pocket, at which point a man immediately grabs me by the elbow from behind and pulls me into this back dark room where, I kid you not, there was a light shining on my face, and I began to hyperventilate, crying, anguished tears, saying, "Please don't send me to prison." I tried everything I could do to get out of it, and fortunately they didn't prosecute me, but I wasn't ever allowed back in that store again. That's where my shoplifting career ended, praise God. I tried to get out of it, and what's interesting is Daniel finds himself in a situation with a certain circumstance that he knows the outcome of what it's going to be, and yet he still does it. Daniel knows that if he prays to our God, he will be thrown into the lion's den. And rather than trying to get out of it, he continues to be obedient. And here's the point that I want us to grasp this morning. Obedience is us declaring the faithfulness of God. Obedience is us declaring the faithfulness of our God. Now, here's the challenge with the word faithfulness. We live in an unfaithful world. We live in a world where breaking your word is normative, where going back on something that you committed to is normal. And so as a result, we have a misconstrued concept of what faithfulness actually is. We don't understand that when God is faithful, that means he is faithful time and time and time and time and time again. He never wavers. He never falters. He never goes back on his word. He never breaks his covenant. He never, ever, ever doesn't do what he says he's going to do. But we don't have a concept for this because we don't have great models of faithfulness in our lives. And so here's some lessons that I see modeled by Daniel. In verse 10, we see Daniel take a stand. The first thing I observe in Daniel's life is he takes a stand. It says in verse 10, now when Daniel learned that the decree had been published, he went home to his upstairs room where the windows opened toward Jerusalem. 3 times a day, he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to his God just as he had done before. You see, Daniel here is defiant in his convictions. Daniel has had a history of obedience and prayer, and so it doesn't matter that he could be put to death. He remains faithful in his convictions, doing exactly what he has always done before. And I think it's fascinating that he didn't just continue to pray, but he actually threw the windows open so that everybody knew he was remaining obedient. Now, if it's me, right, human nature, I would just pray with my eyes open in my mind. Just praying in my mind and hoping that nobody would know I'm actually praying in my mind. I'm not gonna throw open the doors of the windows and actually get on my knees when I know that I'm going to be punished in death. And yet, Daniel still does so as an act of obedience to demonstrate his faith that God would be faithful in how he cares for him. I remember being in high school. I was homeschooled for most of my upbringing, but I was allowed to go to public school for a few years of my high school experience. And I remember it was my sophomore year of high school. It was my first experience getting to go to public school. And every year we had this thing called See You at the Pole. Are you familiar with See You at the Pole? I don't know if we do this. Do we do this still? Yes? Okay. See you at the pole. So I was really excited because I remember being at youth church on Wednesday night, and I'm pumped up with all the other youth kids, and we're I'm going to see you at the pole tomorrow. I can't wait to see you at the pole. And so Thursday morning rolls around, and I remember showing up, and I'm pumped, and I'm ready to see you at the pole. And we stand around, and we all hold hands, and we're praying, and we're fervently contending for God to move in our school. And it's an incredible experience when all of a sudden I begin to notice as other students, my peers, begin to walk in and start to look and judge and take notice. And I began to feel embarrassed in that moment. And I remember kind of dropping my hand from holding the others and kind of pretending that I had to wipe my hand as I take their hands and put them together as I begin to back away slowly, going from over here 50 feet away. You got this! See you at the pole. See you next year. You got this. Because I succumbed to a peer pressure that had people around me judging my act of praying. And rather than standing firm and taking a stand for my God and praying in public, I shied away and didn't want anybody to know that I was associated with this group that was seeing each other at the pole. Daniel doesn't succumb to the peer pressure. And Daniel wasn't facing judgment of a bunch of high school students. Daniel was facing certain death. And yet Daniel still remains obedient. His character was so strong and so throughout his entire life in honor of God that he was faultless in his work, he was faultless in his character, and he was only faulted for being fervent in his prayers. You see, people are watching us. People are paying attention to how we navigate obedience in this walk with God. They're paying attention. Our kids are paying attention. Our friends are paying attention. Coworkers, family members, they're paying attention to how we navigate this thing called life. And do I only get faulted for being fervent in my prayers, or if I throw open the window of my life, would I be ashamed of what is found out? And Daniel lives his life in such a way that he was faultless before God and before man. It says at the end of this verse, just as he had done before. He prays just as he had done before. You see, Daniel at this time would have been in his mid-80s. And he had done this act again and again and again so frequently and so fervently that it wasn't even a question as to whether or not he should be obedient. He didn't even have to ponder whether or not he would continue to serve God in this way. He immediately knew exactly what action he was supposed to take because he had developed a lifestyle, a lifetime of a habit spent in prayer. And so when the opportunity came to choose death and pray, or to not pray and live, he had no question in his mind that he was going to choose to pray and be obedient to God. There was no question in his mind. And oftentimes when we set out to begin to be obedient to God, there will be critics that rise up. There will be people that don't understand the decisions that we're making and the lifestyle choices that we're making, and critics can rise up, and it can make us put a question mark where God always intended for there to be a period. It can make us wonder about whether or not what we're doing is correct or not. That's why we have to be so mindful of the voices we allow in our life. King Darius allowed these men's voices to speak to him in such a way that appealed to his ego, that caused him to put a law into place that led to Daniel being thrown into the lion's den. What are the voices that we're giving permission to speak into our life? What voices are we giving permission to have that kind of weight in our lives? See, God doesn't always demonstrate his faithfulness exactly what we want, when we want, how we want, in the exact moment that we want. God provides in a divine faithfulness at his time of choosing, at his time, his perfect time. And oftentimes I find that we're so busy trying to tell God how to do his job that we don't stop to listen to how God wants to prove his faithfulness in our lives. We spend so much time saying, God, if you would only do this, if you would only do that, if you would only accomplish things in this way, as opposed to trusting God's faithfulness, that his ways are higher than our ways, his thoughts are higher than our thoughts. He sees the entirety of the picture of our lifetime. We only see the snippet and the glimpse of what we want in that moment when we're a 2-year-old stomping our feet saying, I want this right now. I want it my way right away. And God's going, no, 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 son and daughter. That is not what's my perfect plan for your life. I have something better in store, but instead we will kick and scream and want exactly what we want when we want it, as opposed to trusting the omnipotence of God who sees the beginning, the middle, and the end. We see this one little piece of the puzzle. We have to trust that God's faithfulness has a plan that is much bigger than the little piece that we get to have a glimpse of. And the second thing I see from Daniel's life is, 1, he took that stand. 2, he walked into the den in faith. He possessed a faith that was resolute even amidst time spent in the den. In verses 16 and 17, it says, so the king gave the order, and they brought Daniel and threw him into the lion's den. The king said to Daniel, may your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you. A stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the rings of the nobles, so that Daniel's situation might not be changed. Now, to give us a picture of what this would have looked like, the den would have had a side entrance that the lions would have entered from, but people who were in violation of the king or the kingdom's ordinances would be dropped from up above from this hole and dropped down to the ground. And this was a form of capital punishment that was utilized at this time in this place because it was much cheaper than imprisonment. In prison, you have to feed people, so they would just banish them to the lions and let the lions have at them. That's how they took care of people that violated the laws of the land. And Daniel, I imagine, as he's being dropped down and he hits the dirt floor, there probably would have been a stench, since so many people were executed this way, a stench of decaying bodies that were still in the room. There probably would have been complete and total darkness as the stone gets rolled atop of the top of the den. And he's sitting now in complete and utter darkness with a smell that would have permeated and probably disgusted him. He probably was hearing the sounds of the lions breathing just feet away. He probably was waiting for those seconds to pass as the lions would devour his body and put him to death. I wonder how many seconds must have gone by as he was just waiting and waiting and waiting. I wonder how many minutes would have passed by, how many hours would have passed by before the angel of the Lord appeared to say to him, "Don't worry, my God is going to deliver you." I wonder what it must have felt like for him in those moments in between. And I can just imagine as Daniel's being dropped down, having served this king so faithfully and now being put to death by the very person that he has served so faithfully, as King Darius shouts out, "May your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you." In other words, good luck. Hope you last through the night. Hope you make it, bud. Hope you're still here in the morning. He's being put to death by the very man that he has served so faithfully. But you know what I think is interesting about King Darius, who doesn't serve God, who doesn't know God? That even an unbeliever recognizes true faith in our God. Even somebody that doesn't know Jesus recognizes a faith that is resolute, that is steadfast, that takes a stand, that chooses to be obedient, that chooses to hope, that chooses to possess faith regardless of what we're enduring, that no matter how long I may spend in that den, I'm going to remain faith-filled no matter what situation gets tossed at me. King Darius acknowledges the faith that Daniel possesses as he observes Daniel remaining resolute in his steadfast faith. Then when the seal is placed on the stone, this is done so that no one can interfere with Darius having sent him to certain death. He puts the seal on the stone so that there's no way anybody can be of assistance to Daniel. This is why it's remarkable that he's able to make it through the night. I don't know what den you may find yourself in this morning. It might be a den of heartache, might be a den of depression, might be a den of regret, might be a den of shame, might be a den of a diagnosis. There's many dens that we find ourselves in at different points in time in life. Our God is faithful. He's present with you. He has not brought you this far to leave you. He is there with you in the midst of that den. He is right there beside you. You may hear the lions breathing right beside you, but our God is right there, stronger than those lions, capable to shut up the mouths of those lions, whatever they may be speaking over your life. Our God is greater than whatever those people could speak over you, your past, your present, or your future. You may hear them talking, but our God can shut up the mouths of any voices that don't line up with his will and his way. I think of obedience like working out. Obedience is a muscle that we have to continually work to strengthen. This past couple of years, I've been on this journey of, I guess it's been about a year and a half now since I last worked out. When Andrew and I found out we were expecting, I was labeled AMA, which is Advanced Maternal Age. I had AMA on my chart. I had elderly on my chart. I had geriatric on my chart because of how old I am. And it's been interesting having gone through this high-risk pregnancy because I was not allowed to work out at all, ever. I could walk, and that was it. And I was a fitness instructor for years, and so it was a really difficult journey to not be permitted to do something that I was so used to doing. So last month, I decide, okay, I'm going to get back after it. My babies are 6 months tomorrow. I can do this. So I show up to the gym, and I about died. It was awful because I hadn't done something for so long. When I tried doing it again, it was painful. It was difficult. I thought death was imminent. I could not breathe, which is why that's the only time I've worked out. Haven't done it again since. Someday I will. Pray for your pastor. But it's a muscle that the more we exercise it, the more we utilize it, the more we do something with it, the easier it becomes. So if I'm obedient again and again and again and again, it becomes instinctive to remain obedient, that even when death is my diagnosis, I don't care what is spoken over me. I will remain obedient in the situation. And no matter how dark my den may get, I'm going to remain faithful to trust that my my God's going to provide at the exact right time in my exact moment of need. But we have to demonstrate the level of obedience that trusts God is faithful at all times in all ways. The third thing I see here about Daniel is he makes a declaration. In verses 21 through 23, Daniel makes a declaration. He says, Daniel answered, "May the king live forever. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me, because I was found innocent in his sight. Nor have I ever done any wrong before you, your majesty." The king was overjoyed, gave orders to lift Daniel out of the den. And when Daniel was lifted from the den, no wound was found on him because he had trusted in his God. See, God is with you. He is for you. He is present in that den of circumstance right there beside you. You need not fight your own battles. God fights them on your behalf. Daniel didn't need to wrestle with the lions because God did it for him. He didn't need to intervene or interfere because God did it for him. He's more than capable of fighting every single battle that we may find ourselves having to wage. And what's interesting is you fast forward through this story, what we find is that Daniel gets released, is raised to the second highest level of prominence in all the land, and King Darius orders the men who were the evil, jealous men, he orders them to death as punishment for what they did. And not only does he punish them to death, he punishes their wives and their children and sends all of them to death so as to demonstrate a rule and a law of the land that we cannot manipulate the king. And so he doesn't have to even engage these people that had plotted against him. God takes care of that too. And so often we want the deliverance before the trial, don't we? I mean, if I was Daniel, I would have wanted to be released from the lion's den before having to drop down into the depths of the den. But oftentimes it's in the depths and the darkness within the den that we actually get to see the proven faithfulness of God in that situation. It requires the den. We can't learn these lessons without experiencing the den. And Daniel had to endure the night in the den in order to see the faithfulness of God prevail. It couldn't have happened any other way. And yet, so often we pray, Jesus, take this from me, take this from me, take this from me, when we should be praying, God, strengthen me, strengthen me, strengthen me. That while I'm enduring the time in this den, I pray that you would gift me with an endurance that would last, an endurance that would allow me to remain obedient in spite of what is happening around me. And what's so amazing as you fast forward in this story is that the miracle that this was to the lost world, because you remember the signet ring that sealed the den, all of the world found that that seal had not been broken. So as a result, the only way Daniel's life could have been spared was by a miracle from God alone. And as a result, the entire nation comes to know Jesus. The entire nation comes to know the Lord, but there is a distance that we have to travel between the problem and the pain of our circumstance and the promise and the provision of God's faithfulness. And that distance is traveled in our level of obedience and how we remain obedient to the voice and the command of God. And in spite of times of doubt, in spite of times of worry, in spite of times of anxiety, God remains faithful. And we are often most faithless amidst the trial, aren't we? That's when we question the most. That's when we tell God how to do his job the most. We do better at the other side, at the end of the trial, than we do within it. I want to invite the team back up, and I want to close with a couple thoughts, because one of the things that I think was most important about Daniel's journey was that he didn't make the decision to be obedient in the lion's den. He made the decision to be obedient in his bedroom with the windows flung open. Daniel wrestled with the lion of fear in the bedroom when he was praying and asking God for help. So much so that when he wrestled the lion of fear, when he approached lions that could tear his flesh apart, he had no fear because he trusted that God was going to provide a way out. In the end, Daniel receives this unsurpassed favor. Daniel receives second highest command in all of the land. In the end, the entire nation comes to know Jesus. And here's what King Darius decrees. He says, I issue a decree that in every part of my kingdom, people must fear and reverence the God of Daniel. For he is the living God. He endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed. His dominion will never end. He rescues and he saves. He performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on the earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions. This decree would not have been issued had Daniel not spent the night with the lions. You never know the impact and the ramification of your den season. Whatever season you find yourself in, whatever den you find yourself surrounded by, no matter how deep it is, no matter how dark it is, no matter how dire it may seem, our God is faithful, and you never know the ramification of your obedience while living within that den. The entire nation gets to come to know Jesus as a result of Daniel's time in his den. And I understand that today can be a challenging day for some moms. Maybe it's a lost relationship with a mom. Maybe it's that you're living life as a spiritual mom but haven't actually had children yet. Mother's Day for me was always a challenging day for so many years because it was a reminder of my den of infertility. It was a reminder of a den of anguish, a den of sadness, a den of confusion, a den of frustration, a den of doubt, a den of anxiety. It was a dark den that now, 14 years of marriage later, 9 years of living in that den, that's a really long night to spend in a den. I understand that a day like today could be difficult. I also understand that you may be experiencing a den that you don't know that you'll ever be able to get out of. Our God is faithful. You're not alone in that den. He is present with you in that den. He has a plan in order to allow you to prosper on the other side of this den, that no matter what it is you are facing, our God is faithful. And I stand before you after so many years of failed attempts to try and get pregnant, years of trying to get matched in private adoption and failure after failure after failure. Public adoption, having a little girl in our home a couple of years ago on Mother's Day, this day 2 years ago. 2 years ago on Father's Day, watching this little girl call my husband Dad, believing this was our daughter, and the judge making a decision that didn't allow for this little girl to be ours. Failed adoption, failed matching, failed attempts to have kids, dens of difficulty, dens of hardship, dens of heartache. Whatever your den may be, our God is faithful, because I stand before you that I would not have my 2 little miracles had God done what I had told God to do all those years ago. You may be crying out in anguish. He hears you. He sees you. He knows you. His ways are higher than our ways. His thoughts are higher than our thoughts. His plans are greater than anything we could begin to hope for or imagine. You keep waiting. You keep being obedient. You keep remaining faithful. It doesn't matter how long that night may seem. Morning will produce joy, because our God provides. Our God is faithful. He is good. What he started, he will continue. So remain faithful. Take a stand. Walk in faith. Make declarations. He is a good Father.